Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The ghost ship that defied death now commands the war zone. The control room buzzed with activity as technicians watched their screens with worry. Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the main display. The UES Spectre, humanity's most advanced warship, hung in space like a dark shadow against the stars. "Warp test starting in 30 seconds, Captain," said a young officer nearby. James nodded but said nothing. His brother Thomas was on that ship. As the commander of the Spectre, Thomas had insisted on leading the first real test of the experimental warp drive. Now James watched from Fleet Command's monitoring station, his stomach tight with worry. 20 seconds. The Spectre was special, not just because it carried his brother, but because it held humanity's newest secret weapon. The ship could hide in plain sight, its hull covered in materials that bent light and sensor readings around it. This stealth technology might finally give humans an edge against the Arcturus Dominion, the alien empire that had pushed mankind to the edge of defeat. 10 seconds. James leaned forward. "Thomas, are you ready?" he asked through the comm. His brother's voice came back clear. "All systems green. We're making history today, James." 5, 4, 3. James held his breath. 2, 1. On the screen, the Spectre's engines flared bright blue. The ship seemed to stretch for a moment like a rubber band being pulled. Then a flash of light filled the display, and the Spectre was gone. "Warp successful," someone called out. Cheers started to rise around the room. James didn't join them. Something felt wrong. "Where's the exit point?" he demanded. The cheers died down as technicians checked their readings. "Sir, we don't have confirmation of re-entry." James felt cold. "What do you mean? Where's the ship?" "Unknown, sir. It's not appearing at the planned coordinates." For the next 3 hours, James watched as Fleet Command sent ships to search the area. They found nothing. No debris. No sign of the Spectre or its crew of 37 people. His brother was simply gone. 3 years later, James Walker now had an office at Fleet Command, not because he'd been promoted, but because they didn't know what else to do with him. After the Spectre vanished, the military shut down the project. They called it a failure and buried it under security clearances so high that even James couldn't access the files anymore. His new desk job was punishment for asking too many questions about his brother's ship. James stared at his computer screen without really seeing it. 3 years of pushing papers. 3 years of nightmares about his brother floating forever in the emptiness between stars. A knock on his door broke his thoughts. "Come in," he called. A young woman in a crisp uniform entered and saluted. "Lieutenant Parker, sir. Admiral Reeves asks to see you immediately." James raised an eyebrow. Admiral Reeves was the head of fleet operations. He didn't call for desk officers without good reason. Did he say why? "No, sir, but he said it was urgent." 10 minutes later, James stood outside the Admiral's office, straightening his uniform before the secretary waved him in. Admiral Reeves was a tall man with gray hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. He didn't stand when James entered, just motioned to the chair across from his desk. "Captain Walker, thank you for coming quickly." "Of course, Admiral." Reeves studied him for a moment, then pressed a button on his desk. The windows turned dark, and a security field hummed to life around the room. "What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level," Reeves said. He turned his screen so James could see it. The video was grainy and dark. It showed a battle in space, human ships fighting against the angular vessels of the Arcturus Dominion. The humans were losing, their formation breaking under heavy fire. Then something strange happened. Dominion ships began to explode one after another, struck by weapons fire that seemed to come from empty space. James leaned closer. For just a moment, as a nearby explosion lit up the darkness, a ship appeared in the video, a human ship with a familiar outline. Then it was gone, like a ghost. "What am I looking at?" James asked, his heart suddenly pounding. "This footage was taken 3 weeks ago at the Battle of Proxima Colony," Reeves said. "Notice anything interesting?" James swallowed hard. That ship, it looked like the Spectre. Reeves nodded. "That's what our analysts think too, but the Spectre was lost 3 years ago." "Could it be another stealth ship? Maybe they continued the program secretly." "No. All stealth projects were shut down after the Spectre disappeared. There are no other ships like it in our fleet." James stared at the frozen image. "Then what is it?" Reeves sighed. "We don't know, but this isn't the first sighting." He brought up more videos, all showing the same thing, a battle going badly for human forces, then the mysterious ship appearing from nowhere, attacking Dominion vessels, and vanishing again. It only targets the enemy, Reed said. Never attacks our ships. In fact, he showed one final video. This is from last week. Colony on New Eden. The Dominion was about to overrun it when our ghost ship appeared and destroyed their entire attack force. James felt a spark of hope for the first time in years. It could be them. It could be the Spectre. Maybe. But that's not the strangest part. Reeves pointed to the screen again. Look at the attack pattern. The way it strikes from blind spots, then circles back. James recognized it immediately. That's Thomas's strategy. He developed it at the Academy. Exactly. Reeves leaned back in his chair. Captain Walker, I need someone to find this ship. Someone who won't broadcast what they're doing. Someone who might recognize patterns that others would miss. You're giving me a ship? James couldn't hide his surprise. The UES Horizon. Small, fast frigate. Good sensors. Officially, you'll be running patrol duty along the outer colonies. And unofficially, find our ghost ship. Determine if it's the Spectre. And if it is, Reeves's eyes were hard. Find out where it's been for 3 years and why it's back now. James stood straighter. When do I leave? Tomorrow. Pick your crew carefully. You'll need people who can keep secrets. As James turned to leave, Reeves called after him. One more thing, Captain. Sir, if it is your brother out there, remember your duty to Fleet Command. James nodded stiffly and left the office, his mind racing. After 3 years of desk duty and nightmares, he finally had a mission. He was going to find the ghost ship, and if it was Thomas, if his brother had somehow survived out there all this time, James was going to bring him home, no matter what Fleet Command wanted. The UES Horizon cut through space, its engines humming with power. Captain James Walker stood on the bridge, watching the stars streak by as they traveled at high speed. It had been 2 weeks since Admiral Reeves gave him this mission, and so far, they had found nothing but cold trails. Captain, we're approaching the Theta system, said Lieutenant Mark Davis from the pilot's seat. James nodded. Slow to half speed. Lieutenant Hayes, start your scans. Anna Hayes was the best sensor specialist in the fleet. James had specifically requested her for this mission. She had a gift for finding things that didn't want to be found. Yes, sir, she said, her fingers dancing over her console. Starting deep space scans now. The Verizon had visited 2 other systems already, following reports of the ghost ship. Each time they arrived too late. All they found were the remains of Dominion ships and strange energy readings that no one could explain. The crew was getting restless, -20 officers and crew members, all handpicked by James, all told only that they were hunting for an unknown vessel. He hadn't shared his suspicions about the Spectre with anyone except his first officer, Commander Bell. Captain, Hayes called out suddenly. I'm picking up unusual quantum disturbances, similar to what we found in the other systems. James moved to her station. Show me. The screen displayed wave patterns that seemed to ripple and shift in impossible ways. It's like echoes, Hayes said, as if something passed through normal space and left ripples behind. How old? Hayes studied her readings. Fresh, less than 6 hours. James felt a spark of excitement. They were just here. Can you track the disturbance? Hayes bit her lip, concentrating. Maybe. The pattern seems to be moving toward the mining colony on Theta IV. Set course, full speed, James ordered. Maybe this time they would be fast enough. Meanwhile, in a place that wasn't quite normal space, the UES Spectre drifted silently. Commander Thomas Walker looked out through the ship's viewports, but what he saw wasn't stars. It was a shifting, swirling darkness streaked with ribbons of blue light, the void between dimensions, their home for the past 3 years. Status report, he said, his voice rough from tiredness. His science officer, Dr. Ben Miller, looked up from his station. Phase stabilizers holding at 40%. Weapons and engines at 75%. We can make one more jump into normal space before we need to rest the systems. Thomas nodded. The Spectre and its crew existed in a nightmare state. When their experimental warp drive malfunctioned 3 years ago, it didn't destroy them as everyone thought. Instead, it trapped them in a partial phase shift, caught between normal space and somewhere else. They could see the real universe. They could even affect it by briefly shifting closer to normal space. But they couldn't fully return, not without the ship tearing itself apart. Sir, called his communications officer. We're picking up distress signals from the mining colony on Theta IV. Dominion ships are attacking. Thomas straightened in his chair. How many? 3 warships. The colony has minimal defenses. Thomas didn't hesitate. Battle stations. Prepare for phase shift. The crew moved quickly to their positions. After 3 years, they operated like a perfect machine. They had learned to use their curse as a weapon. The Spectre could appear from nowhere, strike with deadly accuracy, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Remember, Thomas said, we hit fast and we hit hard. No lingering in normal space longer than 2 minutes. The last time they stayed too long, the phase shift nearly collapsed completely. Half the ship started to materialize in normal space while the other half remained shifted. 5 crew members died before they managed to stabilize. Phase shift in 3, 2, 1. The swirling void outside the viewports faded, replaced by the black of space dotted with stars. The colony of Theta IV appeared ahead, a cluster of lights on a small moon. 3 angular Dominion warships hung above it, firing energy weapons at the surface. They haven't seen us yet, said the tactical officer. Stealth systems holding. Target the lead ship's engines, Thomas ordered. Fire when ready. The Spectre's weapons charged silently. Then beams of energy lanced out, striking the Dominion ship's propulsion system. The alien vessel lurched, its engines flaring and then dying. The other 2 ships immediately began scanning for the attacker. Moving to position Alpha, said the pilot, guiding the Spectre to a new firing position. Thomas watched the timer on his console. 1 minute, 15 seconds in normal space. Fire on target 2. More energy beams shot out, slicing through the second Dominion ship's weapons array. It spun wildly, disable but not destroyed. Sir, the science officer called, I'm detecting a human ship entering the system. Fast frigate, UEES classification. Thomas felt a strange jolt. Fleet send help. That's unusual. 30 seconds left in normal space, warned the tactical officer. Target the 3rd ship's bridge and fire. The Spectre's weapons struck with perfect accuracy. The last Dominion ship went dark, drifting harmlessly away from the colony. 10 seconds. Called the science officer. Sir, the human ship is hailing all frequencies. They're asking for the Spectre by name. Thomas froze. Phase shift failing, warned the tactical officer. We need to go now. Thomas wanted to stay, to find out who knew they existed, but the ship was already shuddering around them. Return to Void, he ordered reluctantly. The stars began to fade as the phase shift pulled them back into the in-between place. The last thing Thomas saw was the human ship growing larger in their viewports, racing toward them as if desperate to make contact. Then they were gone, back to their prison of swirling darkness and blue light. On the bridge of the horizon, James Walker stared at the empty space where, for just a moment, he'd seen a familiar shape. Did you get a clear scan? He demanded. Lieutenant Hayes shook her head. Not completely, sir, but what I did get. She looked up with wide eyes. It matches the Spectre's configuration. And there's more. The quantum readings suggest the ship isn't fully in our dimension. It's partially phased out of normal space. So that's how they appear and disappear, James whispered. Hayes nodded slowly. The crew could still be alive in there, Captain, but I don't know how we could reach them. James stared at the now empty space. We just missed them, he said quietly. Then, with new determination, but we're getting closer. Next time we'll be ready. He turned to Commander Bell. Send a message to Admiral Reeves. Tell him we've confirmed it's the Spectre, and tell him we need a quantum physicist, the best he can find. For the first time in 3 years, James felt real hope. His brother wasn't dead. He was lost, caught in some kind of dimensional trap, and James was going to find a way to bring him home. Dr. Elisa Morgan was not what James had expected. The quantum physicist was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She had arrived on the horizon by special transport just 3 days after James' report to Admiral Reeves. So you're telling me, she said, studying the data on the screen in the ship's conference room, that the Spectre is trapped in a partial phase shift between dimensions. That's our best guess, James replied. Can you help us reach them? Dr. Morgan frowned. Maybe, but first, I need to understand exactly what happened to them. Before she could continue, the ship alarm blared. Commander Bell's voice came over the speaker. Captain to the bridge, emergency. James and Dr. Morgan rushed to the bridge. The main screen showed a message from Fleet Command, Priority 1. The shipyards at Arcturus Base are under attack, Bell explained. Massive Dominion fleet. They came out of nowhere. James felt cold. Arcturus Base was humanity's primary shipyard. If it fell, the war could be lost in a single day. How far are we? He asked. 2 hours at maximum speed. Set course immediately. As the horizon changed direction, Lieutenant Hayes looked up from her console. Sir, Arcturus Base is where they built the Spectre. James nodded slowly. My brother will know that too. The void around the Spectre seemed darker than usual. Thomas stared at the readings on his console with growing alarm. Confirm this, he ordered. His tactical officer nodded grimly. Confirmed, sir. The Dominion has launched a surprise attack on Arcturus Base. 4 dreadnoughts, 12 cruisers, and at least 30 smaller vessels. Thomas stood up. How did they gather such a force without our intelligence detecting it? Unknown, sir, but the base defenses won't hold against those numbers. The science officer spoke up. Sir, Arcturus Base is. I know what it is, Thomas cut him off. It's where we were built, and it's the heart of the fleet shipbuilding capacity. The crew fell silent, all thinking the same thing. If Arcturus Base fell, humanity might lose the war. Thomas made his decision. Prepare for phase shift. All power to weapons and engines. Sir, the science officer protested. Our systems haven't fully recovered from the last shift. If we push them now, I know the risks, Dr. Thomas said quietly. But if we don't act, there might not be a humanity to return to. No one argued further. They prepared the ship, each person silently accepting what might be their final mission. Phase shift in 3, 2, 1. The battle at Arcturus Base was already lost when the horizon arrived. The massive Dominion fleet had broken through the outer defenses and was closing on the shipyards. The few remaining human ships fought bravely, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Take us in, James ordered. Target the nearest cruiser. Sir, Commander Bell said quietly, there are too many. We can't make a difference. James knew Bell was right, but he couldn't just watch. We have to try. All weapons ready. Before the horizon could fire, a Dominion cruiser near the center of their formation suddenly exploded. Then another and another. What's happening? James demanded. Lieutenant Hayes leaned forward over her sensors. Sir, it's them. The Spectre is here. The ghost ship was barely visible, a shimmer in space that moved with impossible speed. It fired from point-blank range, its weapons tearing through Dominion ships before they could respond. They're drawing the enemy's fire away from the base, Commander Bell said with awe. James watched the battle unfold. He recognized his brother's tactics, striking at the heart of the enemy formation, creating confusion. But something was wrong. The Spectre's movements were becoming erratic. Occasionally, parts of the ship would flicker into full visibility before fading again. Their phase shift is destabilizing, Dr. Morgan said, studying Hayes' sensor readings. They're pushing their systems too hard. James made a decision. Lieutenant Hayes, can you set up a signal on an oscillating frequency? I want to try something. What kind of frequency, sir? James gave her a specific pattern of numbers. Hayes looked confused, but entered them into her console. What are you doing? Dr. Morgan asked. When we were kids, James explained, my brother and I made up a code to send messages to each other. If he's really on that ship, he'll recognize it. Hayes activated the signal. It pulsed outward, a simple pattern repeating over and over. In the chaos of battle on the bridge of the Spectre, alarms were blaring. The phase shift was failing, systems overloading throughout the ship. We can't maintain this much longer, the science officer warned. 2 minutes at most before catastrophic failure. Thomas gripped his chair as the ship shuddered around him. They had destroyed 3 dreadnoughts and 7 cruisers, but it wasn't enough. The Dominion forces were still too strong. Sir, the communications officer called out suddenly. I'm picking up a strange signal. It's not a standard fleet pattern. Ignore it, Thomas ordered. Focus on. But sir, it's... The officer paused, listening to the signal through his headset. His eyes widened. Sir, it's coming from that human frigate, the one that tried to contact us before. And it's in Morse code. Old Earth Morse code. Thomas froze. What does it say? The officer listened. It's just repeating the same thing. 3 to 279 to 221 to 28. Thomas felt as if all the air had left his lungs. 3 to 279 to 221 to 28. The numbers he and James had used as children when they wanted to verify a message truly came from one another. It's my brother, he whispered. For a moment, the hopelessness of their situation lifted. James was out there, looking for him, trying to help. Sir, what should we do? His tactical officer asked. Thomas straightened. Adjust our phase harmonics to match that signal's frequency. Let them see us clearly, just for a moment. But, sir, do it. The officer complied. The Spectre's phase shift altered, bringing the ship briefly into fuller alignment with normal space. On the horizon, Lieutenant Hayes gasped. Captain, the Spectre is becoming more visible. They're responding to our signal. James stepped forward, staring at the screen. For one clear moment, he could see the Spectre in all its details. The sleek hull, the distinctive profile, and on the bridge, a figure standing tall, looking directly toward them. Thomas, James said quietly. Then the ship flickered and faded, returning to its ghost-like state. But something had changed. The Spectre's attack pattern shifted, now working in clear coordination with the human defenders. James turned to Dr. Morgan. Tell me you can find a way to bring them back. Dr. Morgan was already working at a console, her fingers flying over the controls. I think I understand what happened to them now. We can't fully rescue them. The damage to their dimensional state is too severe. But maybe we can talk to them. As the battle raged around them, a small hope was born. The brothers had found each other across the void between dimensions, and somehow James would find a way to bring the ghost ship home. The battle at Arcturus base ended in a narrow victory for humanity. With the Spectre's help, the Dominion fleet had been forced to retreat. But the cost was high. 3 defense platforms destroyed and nearly 20% of the shipyard damaged. On the horizon, James met with Admiral Reeves via secure communication. The Admiral's hologram stood in the ship's conference room, his face grim. So it's true, Reeves said after hearing James' report. The Spectre survived, and your brother is still commanding it. Yes, sir, James replied, but they're trapped in some kind of dimensional shift. Dr. Morgan is working on a way to communicate with them. Reeves was silent for a moment. Walker, there's something you should know. Intelligence reports suggest the Dominion has taken a special interest in your ghost ship. They formed a hunter-killer group specifically to trap it. James felt cold. Who's leading it? Commander Krell. The name hung in the air like a threat. Krell was infamous among human forces, a brilliant tactician known for his ruthlessness. He had destroyed more human ships than any other Dominion commander. Give me everything you have on Krell's movements, James said, and I need more resources for Dr. Morgan's work. Reeves nodded. You'll have it. But, Walker, be careful. There are people in Fleet Command who see the Spectre as a weapon, not as a ship with a crew to be rescued. After the call ended, James went to find Dr. Morgan. She had converted a small lab on the horizon into her workspace, filling it with equipment rushed from Fleet Command. Any progress? He asked. Dr. Morgan looked up from her calculations. Yes, actually. I think I've figured out what happened to them. She pointed to a complex diagram on her screen. When their warp drive malfunctioned, it didn't just move them through space. It shifted them partially into another dimension, a parallel space that overlaps with ours. Can we get them back? Morgan hesitated. Not completely, no. They've been in this state too long. The ship and its crew have become integrated with this dimensional space. Pulling them fully back would kill them. James's hope dimmed. So they're trapped forever. I didn't say that, Morgan replied. We can't bring them home, but we might be able to establish stable communication. Maybe even help them control their shifts between dimensions. Before James could respond, Lieutenant Hayes' voice came over the speakers. Captain to the bridge, urgent. When James arrived, Hayes was bent over her console. Sir, we're picking up a distress call from the research station on Vega Prime. They're under attack. Dominion forces? Yes, sir, and the attack pattern matches Commander Krell's known tactics. James's jaw tightened. He's trying to draw out the Spectre. Set course for Vega Prime, maximum speed. In the void between dimensions, the Spectre drifted while its crew made repairs. The battle at Arcturus base had pushed their systems to the breaking point. They needed time to recover. Thomas sat in his quarters, staring at an old photo of himself and James. His brother had found him. After 3 years of thinking they were forgotten, help was finally coming. The intercom buzzed. Commander, his first officer said, we're detecting a Dominion attack.